Okay, I'm called to order the Common Council of the City of Gladstone. Today's date is January 27, 2015, and the time is 8:10 in the evening. Can you please join, roll call please there, Jolene? Can you do a roll call for us?
Councilor Nelson?
Here.
Councilor Mercero?
Here.
Councilor Johnson?
Here.
Councilor Sickman?
Here.
Councilor McMahon?
Here.
Councilor Reisner?
Here.
Mayor Jacobellis?
Here. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, folks. First off, extreme apologies. We can't let that happen. Just sorry to make you wait. Anyway, right now we'll go from any business from the audience. Anybody have anything to say besides why'd you make us wait? No business from the audience. We don't have anything on the consent agenda. Down to correspondence, basically we just had a letter from some business owners regarding the business license fees. And just a quick note, I made a phone call last meeting because we got a letter, and all I'm asking is if anybody wants to step up and just write these people a quick letter saying, basically we heard, we got the complaint, we're sorry, we're going to be addressing this probably in March or April. Anybody want to do that, or is it necessary?
So we are going to address it.
We gotta.
Okay.
We gotta talk about it.
I know the Russos.
Okay. You'll take care of it.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I have a quick question on it for staff. I think just what is the home occupancy license fee versus why do they not just have a business, or why do they have to have both?
Well, the home occupancy permit is there to integrate certain businesses into a neighborhood and maintain the residential feel. It has a lot to do with, there are two types of permits, has a lot to do with how many trips are generated. So that's why a home occupancy permit is issued. So if you're generating a little more traffic, you have to notify more neighbors. They have input.
That's just done the one time when they apply, or
yes.
They're not applying, or they're not getting the neighbors?
It's just the one time, I believe, unless the business would change substantially over time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Steve's going to take care of that. Appreciate it. Now down to the regular agenda, which is the Planning Commission Municipal Code Review Request. Pete, can you give us a history on this?
Speaking in behalf of the chair,
please come forward. State your name and address.
My name is Kirk Stemple. I am on Planning Commission. I am Tammy's better half. She sent me with a little letter to read, so bear with me. I'm still trying to get used to bifocals. Mayor Jacobellis and City Council members, Planning Commission Chair Tammy Stemple was not able to be here tonight because she had to work out of her Seattle office, but has asked me to present the Commission's plan for the Code and Ordinance Review. All of you should have a copy of the original intent and process included in your packet. As part of the original charge from City Council, this review was to look at what could be modified in order to make our commercial zones more appealing for development and redevelopment. We were to look at what barriers existed that potentially stopped economic development in our core areas. To date, we have done a cursory review of items 1 through 6 and are about to address the individual zones. With the completion of the Portland Avenue redevelopment plan in 2009, we would like to review to include the development of design standards. At this time, we would like your input on whether to continue with our original charge, or is there a different approach you would like us to take?
So the original charge, if I've got this right, was to go through them and clean them up.
Yep, exactly.
And how far along are we in the process, do you think? Better than halfway?
Through 6.
And how many we have?
17.
Yeah, but the first 6 were easier than the last 11.
17's there, ain't it?
So
yeah.
Title 17's the biggest one.
Yeah, that
Right.
17's going to be a big hit. So we're working at it.
But the concern is we'll get so wrapped up in this, we won't move to other.
Hey, we'll always
Okay,
find
I'm just
something cool.
asking what the bottom line is.
It does take a lot of time, yes.
But it's needed.
It is needed.
It's
absolutely.
been years. That,
And
because
as
we
two
started
former
this a couple of
planning
years ago.
commission members that
Okay.
we're working at three that, touched into it, it needs to be fixed.
I think they need to continue just like they're doing. Actually, I think Tammy put a lot of this together with the different steps and everything. I think it's a good way to approach it. The one thing that if we do have them continue forward with it, which would be my recommendation, there's two things that I'd maybe like to have them open a dialogue on at some point during this. One of which is the only time, from my recollection, the only time we can address curbs and sidewalks and such throughout the city is when they are starting a new development.
Right.
Okay. Maybe we want to look at having an avenue for when something comes before the Planning Commission. Is there a way to, depending on the size of the redevelopment, to get curbs and sidewalks then at a later date? I don't know what all would be entailed in that, what it would look like. It's just, it might be a good, something to look at and
Food for thought.
at least start the discussion. The other thing is to see if there's a missing piece between the planning department and the completed project. And I don't know if it would be relevant for Planning Commission to start this conversation, but it was just a thought to take a look to see if you can break down where that missing piece is and maybe some thoughts to how we could fix that missing piece. And those are just a couple of thoughts I had that might be, could be started at the Planning Commission level.
In regards to the sidewalks, rather than just what comes before the Planning Commission, would be what comes before, for a building permit. For example, we have a house down here about 3 blocks that was on a vacant lot, that was built recently on a vacant lot, and because it wasn't a development, they didn't have to put in curbs or sidewalks, which shocked me. So I agree with you. And
Any thoughts on any of this? Len, Tom, Steve?
Keep going the way they are.
yeah,
Just keep charging forward.
The only thing I can say on this, that it's been going on for a while now, okay, and I would like to see some goal of when they'd like to complete it, or can complete it.
So time frames on XYZ sections and
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
we're moving forward towards some direction.
absolutely.
Because several issues can come up with on the results. Okay, code enforcement and such
Right.
can be tied to that, and it's hard to force somebody to try to do code enforcement when in fact they don't know the true code.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons for them going over all these, because the codes were a bit, I don't know, I got the correct word, ambiguous, whatever, okay, were hard to interpret by people, by the citizens. So one of the goals, I believe, by the Planning Commission was, in fact, to make the codes a little bit more straightforward. And in doing that, it would help the code enforcement program to move on.
And we would love, in our meetings, and we've talked in the past, to get Sean more involved with, what's going on, so he can recognize this stuff, and, we get his input, because it's valuable, so.
So the comment about the goal for time is just, is it going to be done in 2 months, or is it going to be done in 2 years?
Absolutely.
So we can get some input.
Sounds good.
thank you so much too for all this
Okay.
time. appreciate,
Right.
Thanks.
thanks a
Next.
lot.
I have a question.
Uh-oh.
When, no, it's an easy one. When you're updating these codes, are you guys having any special meetings just to work on?
No, what we do is usually a time frame at the end of the regular planning commission meeting, depends on how long the night
Well, I
is.
was thinking if you got a big agenda, you don't have much time to do that extra work.
Exactly, and you know, you get to the point where you're so tired of, you know, going back and forth. It's like, let's just push it off to another. You know, a work session, I think would be beneficial.
That's what I'm thinking. Like
You know,
what we're doing all the time now,
yeah,
work
just,
sessions,
you
you
know,
get a lot
nice-
accomplished.
You know, a 2 hour where you can spend just
You don't have
on
any
this.
interference from outside. You're just working
Absolutely.
on the project.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Did Tammy want a motion or anything, or did she just want to bring it to us?
Just want to bring it to you guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. All right, we're now, I think that's it for the regular agenda. We're now going to recess to the work session. Yes? Correct?
Correct.
On the work session, on the regular agenda, we have item number 3, which is, oh my God, the new elected officials training video.
Looks like it's all primed, ready to go. Thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Wait. Can we switch these items?
No.
Oh my God. All right. I'm sure these people want to watch this video.
Yeah, actually, I kind of do.
All right. Plug it in.
Is there a TV on their side?
Hello, I'm Lynn McNamara,
Well, we can't see.
Executive Director of CIS, City County Insurance Services. If you're an elected official in one of CIS's member cities or counties, you probably think of us as your insurance company. But what you may not know is CIS is much, much more. In this program, we'll acquaint you with our mission and talk about how CIS can help your entity protect its financial and human resources. CIS is, first and foremost, a service program of the League of Oregon Cities and Association of Oregon Counties, and has been since 1981. Here to talk about the relationship of CIS to LOC and AOC are AOC's Executive Director, Mike MacArthur, and LOC's Executive Director, Mike McCauley.
City County Insurance Services, or CIS, was created by AOC and LOC to provide services to our members.
In the late 70s, commercial insurers were exiting the market, and if insurance was available, it was at very high rates. The League of Oregon Cities and the Association of Oregon Counties formed CIS in 1981 to address that grave concern of cities and counties that insurance was either unaffordable or unavailable.
CIS is governed by a board of 10 trustees. 5 of those trustees are selected by the Board of Directors of the Association of Oregon Counties. 5 are selected by the Board of Directors of the League of Oregon Cities. Each of those organizations also selects its Executive Director to serve on the Board of Trustees. So the governance is by the members.
CIS exists for cities and counties in a similar fashion that AOC and LOC were formed so that cities and counties could collectively be stronger.
Not a traditional insurance company. It's a pool. Therefore, it's owned by the members. The members share the risk. The members share the rewards. So we are more sensitive to the needs of our members, and we are not looking to make a profit for our shareholders.
Since CIS is a collective of the cities and counties coming together, one city's actions or one county's actions will affect the financial stability or rating for all of the cities and counties. So to the degree that losses are reduced, all cities and counties benefit. Conversely, if a city or a county experiences a severe loss, the collective will also absorb the impact of the loss.
One of the differences of CIS is our efforts to try and avoid claims. CIS prides itself on managing risk.
Risk management really is at the heart of everything we do at CIS. As an elected official, you may not think of yourself as a risk manager, but you have an important risk management role to play. We asked Tualatin Mayor and CIS trustee Lou Ogden to talk about how CIS works for cities and counties and what CIS means for elected officials.
CIS is unique in that the Board of Trustees are elected and appointed officials from cities and counties. The insurance markets fluctuate, They fluctuate based upon their costs, based upon their profits, their losses, and it's usually over a fairly large geographic spans. But through CIS, we're able to actually control our costs because they are the costs that our members incur. And so the Board of Trustees is committed to trying to smooth rates as much as possible. We're able to do that because when we do have good years, we have cash that we can use to sort of smooth and subsidize the rates in the years where maybe there are higher losses. But it comes back to the fact that the CIS member-driven effort is to help educate entities on how to minimize risk, how to reduce losses. They provide that service, that touch, as well as that tech, so that we can keep our losses under control. And then again, the Board of Directors is concerned about the impacts to their own cities and counties, so we care very much that we smooth those rates as much as possible. We're not driven, we're not subject to the market fluctuations that the broad insurance industry is subject to. I think it's important for elected officials to understand that CIS is not just an insurance company. In fact, it's not an insurance company at all. CIS is an entity that supports cities. It's comprised of cities. There's actually three things to keep in mind as we think about CIS. Number one, the rates need to be and are competitive. We shop our rates, we make sure that they match the market. More importantly, CIS provides services to cities to help control costs, to help educate our staff, educate our elected officials, educate our employees. We provide that ability for us to manage our own costs and our own risks. But beyond that, CIS is a group of cities and counties coming together to support each other by participating in the pool. City of Tualatin actually has, I believe, all the coverages that are available through CIS. We have our liability, we have property, we have auto physical damage, we have benefits, that is medical, dental, we have long-term disability, we have a workers' comp. And why do we have all of our coverages with CIS? Well, for a number of reasons. First of all, they're competitive in all those lines. We actually have shopped all those and found that CIS has been competitive, if not lower cost. Secondly, there's value in having all of our coverages with one entity. We have the known folks that we deal with. We're not dealing with underwriters or adjusters on the other side of the continent. We're dealing with folks that are part of our organization. And the other component of it goes back to the fact that we support the entity that supports us.
Here at CIS, we think the best claim is the one that never happens. And so the majority of our services are aimed at helping you prevent claims. Here to talk about how elected officials can avoid some common liability problems is Baker County Commission Chair and CIS Trustee Fred Warner.
The elected officials make up a council or a commission, and that is where the real authority lies with local government. If you have issues with employees, it would be up to the entire council or the commission. CIS, we see claims where individual elected officials take personnel matters or they speak for the council when they don't have that authority, and those are just claims waiting to happen. Well, remember, as an elected official, social media can be an important tool, but you should always refrain from putting your organization's business and any negative thoughts into your social media. It will come back to haunt you, and you are held to a higher standard, and that's something that all elected officials should remember. When we have a claim, CIS is our partner. They go out of their way to try to keep us from having claims by having pre-loss legal, by doing trainings like we're doing today to help us avoid claims. They are our partners in our risk management.
Fred brought up a good point. Elected officials are held to a higher standard and their actions are often scrutinized. In fact, elected officials make so many decisions that claims are more likely. Managing risk of this type can feel like a minefield, especially if you're new. To help you deal with some of those minds, here are some best practices that we can offer. Know all you can about the legal limits on your responsibilities and authority. Understand the laws about the conduct of public entity business. And finally, when faced with a decision that is difficult, particularly an HR issue, consult with CIS Pre-Loss Legal. It's free and here to support our cities and counties. Your local insurance agent is another great resource for elected officials. Here is Ken Wood, CIS trustee and a longtime insurance agent for cities and counties, to explain how an agent can help you.
Well, as an elected official, I would hope our insurance agent of record would be a resource for the city management team in making sure that things are properly covered. And if there's a risk, we try to see how we can cover it or reduce the risk. But I would hope there'd be a valuable staff resource for the city management team. Your insurance agent should provide an evaluation of exposures for your entity, coverage design, and pricing alternatives. Public risks have unique and different exposures compared to individuals or private businesses. Your insurance agent should be responsible to advocate for your entity's needs and best interests. Most insurance agents should participate in the executive risk management decisions of your city or county, set priorities, and help make recommendations.
As Ken pointed out, agents are there to be the expert on your exposures and also an advocate for your entity. Make the most of their services. We'd also suggest that you make the most of CIS's services and resources for your city or county, most of them available at no cost. Here to talk about CIS's services is CIS trustee and Columbia County Commissioner Earl Fisher.
Well, one of the services that we really think is important is the risk management piece of it, and that is being able to call up and get a risk manager to come out and look at some of the things that we do. Someone to come out and work with our safety committees and to help us look at our safety procedures throughout the entire operation. In addition to helping you identify risks or problems that you might have in your organization, it also provides some grant money to then address those very issues that you have identified. And I think that's extremely important, particularly those of us in the government side of the work, to be able to know that there's some funding out there to help take care of those problems that have been identified. Another service that I think is really important is best practices. There's lots of things that county government can get involved in, but one of the things we really need to make sure we do is that we're doing the things that are the best practices for our community and for our employees. I think the pre-law services are really important to have, to be able to pick up the telephone and call an attorney before you make that decision concerning an employment problem. One of the areas that I think CIS helps us a great deal in, and that is dealing with our employees, not only after we've hired them, but even beforehand, to be able to do the pre-hiring reviews, to look at our policies that we have in terms of hiring, to go back and examine those to make sure that we're doing the right things, asking the right questions, doing the right research, so that we avoid issues in the future because we made the right decision to begin with. One of the other programs CIS has is a return to work program. When an employer or employee is off for whatever reason, CIS will work with his doctor and a case manager to find the best way and the most appropriate way to bring the employee back. And that's important for the employer from the standpoint of saving some funding. It's also important to the employee to be able to know that he's being well handled and treated, and most of the time they're really eager to get back to work, and we're not rushing him, but he knows he's coming back in a good environment. CIS also provides a number of online courses. Those of us who have to be concerned about things like making sure that you've had the right classes to take care of risk management, that you've had the OSHA requirements met, those sorts of classes can be done online. In addition, for those of you who are like me, somewhat technologically challenged, We can also go online and find some of those more soft type of classes that teach us how to turn on the computer. You can find all of these at the CIS Learning Center online. One of the other things that CIS provides is a really excellent conference. And during that, they provide numbers of workshops. I would really encourage public officials to be there. There's various tracks. For example, they have one on law enforcement, which is extremely important and informative. On risk management, there's an opportunity to learn with your peers about the ways that we can make a more effective and efficient operation in our public service.
We appreciate the wisdom of the elected officials who serve on the CIS Board of Trustees and hope their advice, combined with CIS's resources and services, will help you achieve your community's goals. For spending time with us today, your entity will receive a bonus, a discount on next year's CIS liability contribution. Thanks for joining your fellow Oregon cities and counties and being a member of CIS. Here to talk about how elected officials can avoid some common liability.
Is that it?
Wake up, Tom.
That's it.
My name is Alicia Johnson. I'm with WSC Insurance, and so I'm your insurance broker for CIS. So I don't know if you guys had any other questions that maybe I could answer on the program, or...
Have just my only edification, have we used them before for assessments or anything?
We use CIS heavily.
Okay.
With employment matters, we not only consult with our city attorney, we consult with CIS attorneys. When we were reviewing our personnel policy, they played a heavy role in that. We have annual risk mitigation meetings, and so we lean on them heavily.
Yes, and that's what WSC does as well as far as the risk management. We work heavily with Jolene as well on any other types of policies and best practices and things like that throughout the year. So there is a credit that will be applied for on this coming up year, and it's 1% of the liability. So it's a good amount of money. And there's other programs that we're working on as well to save the city.
So how do you, I'm sorry, I was going to say, how do you work together? I mean, you're agency
an insurance agent, right? So we offer all the negotiation and work with the city just to make sure that all the risk management's in place, and then CIS is the actual insurance carrier. So in the event that there's a claim, they're the ones defending and they're the ones paying out the dollar amount, and I'm helping you through the process and making sure everything's, all the risk management's done up front, and then also through that process to help going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Item number 4, the Code Enforcement Program.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, I've asked Chief Pride to put on a presentation about code enforcement, as it's a hot topic, and he's brought Code Enforcement Officer Sean Boyle with him. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Pride.
Thank you, Pete. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. He's there, our subject matter expert on code enforcement in Gladstone. This is a great opportunity to have a conversation with Council about the background of code enforcement, the state of code enforcement, and perhaps what might be in terms of code enforcement. I suspect all of you hear things, wants, needs, desires of Gladstone community. I know Pete hears things, I hear things, Sean hears things. And so we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. If anybody recalls the name Dr. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of his axioms is begin with the end in mind. So as we move forward through this deliberate process of kind of trying to figure out what we want for code enforcement in Gladstone, that might be a good approach to be thinking about. What might it look like in the future? We're hearing a lot of comments about needing more code enforcement. Of course, as you should know and do know, Sean's role is split into 2 jobs, and actually 3, because there's always that other duties as assigned component. He deals with a very critical function aside from code enforcement, and that is our evidence processing and property management, which is absolutely critical to to our credibility in court and so on. So Sean is, we've gone through a process of taking a look at the program. Sean has been very helpful in terms of when I came on board and informing me what came before, how the operation ran in terms of code enforcement. We had a job task analysis conducted, and out of that we learned some things that we could do better. And we have implemented some changes to the program in terms of better communication, better policy, better documentation, and better support from the supervisors. Sean does have, if you didn't know this, a pretty extensive background in public safety beyond his role here in Gladstone, and he can choose or not choose to talk about that. So he brings in a breadth of experience and certainly will answer any questions you have about his work. I think one thing I would tell you about the code enforcement function, it's kind of unique depending on the size of your city. Larger departments, as you probably know, they have a designated person or persons, depending on the size of the jurisdiction, to deal with code enforcement. At my previous city, our planning department for the city had the code enforcement function and had 2 people, which was really nice to have. So if I'm saying this inaccurately, let me know, Sean, but he gets pulled a lot of different directions, and that's what happens in smaller agencies like ours. That in the smaller agencies, if you didn't know, make up approximately 90% of police departments across the United States. So in those smaller police departments, often staff will be doing a lot of different duties because we don't have enough bodies to designate for specific functions, such as the case with Sean. In the staff report that was provided to council, you see some options that are listed there. The third one is certainly a caveat that there's a lot of ideas I'm sure that we haven't even considered yet. In fact, Sean may at some point talk about a couple ideas that he has in addition to those that are listed on the staff report. I might also add that I know at least a piece of your retreat this weekend, you said you were going to talk about the public policy and policing, and one of the things that occurs to me is that in our current public policy and policing, we don't have anything that talks about code enforcement. Not saying it needs to be in there, but that certainly could be a component we add to it that talks about the service level that is desired in the code enforcement arena. So that's kind of it to start us off, and if council has questions, comments, we're here, and we'll probably be sharing the podium here.
Chief mentioned you may like to speak. Is there?
Well, I didn't necessarily have anything, prepared. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As the chief mentioned, there has been a lot of, maybe a push for a direction to have, greater code enforcement, and I can certainly understand the reason for that. Those are things I would desire in my own community as well. And to lay the groundwork, like the chief mentioned, he's kind of started that for me earlier, is that my position is split into 2 positions. I got a half-time code enforcement position and a half-time property room position. And so, that basically leaves about 20 hours a week on average for code enforcement duties. So, there's certainly, I can understand the desire that you can, this position, that code enforcement aspect has historically been in the nuisance area. With the exception of counties and some cities, most smaller agencies, there's 2 elements, which is broken up into nuisance and then zoning and land use, and that's kind of how this position has been broken up into. My primary functions have been in the nuisance category, and prior to I think 2009, I believe, Jonathan Block, who at one point was a city planner for the city of Gladstone, conducted all the zoning and land use issues and enforcement for the city of Gladstone until he retired. Upon his retirement, that void has not been filled. We've attempted to do some Band-Aid approach, if you will, to see if we can provide some of those levels of service with a combination with me working with Clay Glasgow, but there's obviously a few hurdles there that there's no IGA in place for a county to officially provide those services, and so we've put that approach in place, but it's been kind of hit and miss at best. And as you can imagine, 20 hours with some reactive code enforcement based on complaints, with some self-initiated activity in there, to throw on, say, zoning at this point, you're putting a bunch of stuff, additional items on the plate, and then something's going to fall off at the end of the day. So, I am here to do whatever council wishes, but if you decide to, throw on some additional duties or change those functions, I'm still going to, I'm going to do whatever the job description says, but just something to keep in mind that, it seems like it's an easy job, but there's a lot of these things can be quite time-consuming. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've talked to the chief about this. We've provided with an administrative assistant, we've provided with a lieutenant, we provided with cars and tasers, but this is something we haven't did anything with for all these years. It's stayed the same. The city has changed, and your job to do it in 20 hours, there's no way you can possibly do it and do it well. I think this is something that we need to look at now to bring this portion of the police department up to date, because we're still back in 1980s and 90s. We've got a lot of catching up to do. You can't do it in 20 hours. I couldn't do it in 20. I don't think any of these guys could do it in 20 hours and do it well. So I think that's something that the city council needs to look at budget-wise, and I don't know how we go about this, but make it a full-time position so that you've got some time to work these issues. And I don't know how you feel, but I'm sure you feel the same way, that you just are.
Well, there are a lot of options. I mean, that's certainly one of them. I met with Pete Boyce, my supervisor, Sergeant Wayne Lawrence, David, city attorney, and Clay Glasgow. You may have been on the phone. I can't recall specifically if you were in actual attendance. But one of the things that we potentially could look at is maybe expanding those services that are covered by the IGA through planning and building code. Is maybe expanding to some of the zoning code violations. Because excuse me. If I were to be assigned zoning enforcement today, it's going to be some time before that program can be implemented, simply because there's going to be a training element involved.
My recollection is that prior to Sean, we had a full-time sworn police officer who did code enforcement. His name was Officer Brown.
Yeah,
and
he went to Clackamas County.
No, he was called up. He was a reservist. He was called up to the first Gulf War. I'm not sure where he ended up after he came back, but I mean, we really did have a full-time person once.
Yeah, I was here then at that time.
Yeah.
Well, he was full-time 40 hours, but it was 40 hours. It was 20 hours code enforcement, 20 hours property room. He was also responsible for managing the property room. And while he was a reserve police officer, the position in and of the code enforcement itself was not sworn.
Are you sure of that? I thought he was a full-time police officer.
He was not. He was not. He did not hold certification. He was a reserve police officer for City of Gladstone.
Didn't he go to Oregon City for working?
He works for Clackamas County.
Clackamas County Code Enforcement. Yeah. I know his mother lives right down over here.
When I think of code enforcement, I think there's kind of like two sides to it, and if I'm incorrect, please let me know. I kind of look at one side as being a safety side, a public safety side, and the other side of it is a neighborhood livability side. And I think, you know, one of the things that I hear a lot is more the livability side, and not that the safety side's not important, it's more important, but a lot of the things I hear are more the livability things. What would help you right now to do your job more effectively?
You know, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to say that there's not any room to, you know, be more efficient.
I mean, more tools. I mean,
there's, like, you know, so I said there's 20 hours. Some of these things are time consuming. A good example is 540 East Arlington. It's an abandoned house. It had gone into foreclosure. The people who were responsible for the property, they left the state. They allowed their nephew, I believe, to reside in the home because it wasn't fully foreclosed on. The bank hadn't taken ownership. And then he started moving in some friends who were into drugs and theft, and we started having a lot of problems over there, including garbage piling up on the property. So there was criminal aspect in addition to the code enforcement aspect. And through that process, we went through an abatement process to get them vacated from the premise, and in dealing with trying to track down with the lending institution that's responsible for it, the notification process, and follow-up notification process required by the code. That was probably a 60-hour project just in my man-hours alone. And so, you know, we successfully got them, you know, removed from the property, and it still sits vacant, and it's, you know, it's prime grounds for someone to come else and start squatting on the property and cause additional problems. But those are just some of the things that we're dealing with. And I don't know that, you know, we could write codes to speed up some of those processes, but they're still going to be time consuming.
Listening to what you said, one of the things that come into my mind is it sounds like there's a lot of research, administrative part to this, like trying to find out who the property owner is, the bank, what bank owns it. Would more administrative help be beneficial for some of that research stuff, or is this just kind of a...
It's a possibility. I mean, you know, under the right circumstances, that might work. I guess we'd have to see what the model would look like, because you know, the right hand's got to know what the left hand's doing, and so it's a possibility. I'm not going to say no, but that's certainly possible.
Well, I guess something I've been hearing consistently is that folks want a more proactive code enforcement presence in the city, and a lot of it is, what I'm hearing too, is the livability. I guess I feel, looking at it, in order to make that happen, I do think we need more hours, so the code enforcement person can patrol and write up these violations that they see. As many of you know, if neighbors don't like reporting violations of other neighbors, so by the time it does get to reported, most likely, you know, it's a pretty large problem. Whereas if we were a little more proactive, maybe we could cut off some of these things before they get to that level. So, looking at the chief's options that he's included in the staffing report, I guess the way I'm leaning right now, looking at that, is I'm thinking of two things. First of all, we're going to be starting the budget process for next fiscal year now. I'd like to try to work into that budget a full-time code enforcement officer with a half-time property room specialist, or whatever the term is. And you know, the other component that Sean talked about that's been problematic is the zoning enforcement, and we do need to find a solution for that. We had a conversation about that today I did with Sean and the chief. You know, we talked about training whoever the code enforcement officer is to a certain level, so he's an understanding of planning and zoning and is able to take care of some of these violations. That's a possibility. It may take some time to be able to train a person to that level. The other option which Sean talked about is trying to contract that service out. So I haven't come down one way or the other on that yet, but it would be something we need to address, which could represent, a change in expenditures.
Well, in that vein, the report that was mentioned earlier that evaluated the code enforcement position, also about that same time, records clerk was evaluated, and there was somewhere in that suggestion that maybe that position could take over the evidence,
right,
which would free up code enforcement.
Right, and that's...
And being that we have a
vacancy
position
right
open,
now.
right.
Right, so that's something to look at. Chief, do you want to address that issue? There's, we did have a person in that position that was very good with the record-keeping duties and had a certain level of efficiency. The next person we hire, there may be some training that's involved to get them to that same level. And then the question will come down to, can we fit all of the records duty in 20 hours a week and be able to have the property room management in 20 hours a week? I think it's definitely worth looking at.
And when it really comes down to it,
also,
I'm sorry.
Works the front window, the lobby, right? So you'd have to have somebody in the office that could fill in the person who's down at the property room.
I don't know that you're going to get records into 20 hours. I'm not a records person. I had performed records when I was a 911 dispatcher here when we did records and 911, but the records requirements have evolved. And Barb, who was the records employee who left, she was a special person as far as record. She was a master of records, and those people that come in and fully understand the job and excel above the average person in that position. You don't come around very often, and she made the job look easy, but she was doing full-time work.
I think that's something none of us know anything about.
In the property room in and of itself, I would argue at this point that it's more than a 20-hour a week job. There's property coming in, property going out, and at this point, as a general rule, you should have about the same amount of property going out as you have coming in, and we're not quite meeting that yet. We're making improvements and trying to meet that, but those are things that are just things to consider.
But you did a great job at that property, and you've been written up because of the good job that you did in the past. And I know that tracking that evidence is pretty important when you go to court, because if there's a break anywhere in that transfer of evidence, then it can be thrown out just because of that. So it's a pretty important job, that evidence.
Correct.
So are we looking for direction at this point, or is this just kind of a discussion as to where we're at with the program, and we're going to wait for the retreat for suggestions, or?
Well, we can fold it into the retreat. If you have some thoughts in mind right now about the program, I'd sure love to hear those. My assumption from what I've been hearing is that we need more proactive code enforcement. If anyone disagrees with that, I'd like to know. But I assume that's a want across the board, not only on council but from citizens also. So moving forward with that, like I said, my plan at this point is to try to find a way to work a full-time code enforcement officer into the budget going into the next fiscal year. We can discuss it further in the retreat this weekend and hash it out a little more there. But we're just looking to answer questions from council, try to give you a better understanding of what the code enforcement program is doing right now. But we also want to hear what counselors want to see out of that code enforcement program. And some of that could come out of the retreat, like you mentioned.
So do we need to make a motion then to start that process as far as looking for full-time, or? do you want
Well,
to
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's
Okay.
kind of going ahead, because I quite frankly don't think we're going. I'd like to see some other options explored before we just budget for a full-time position. That's, and I don't think we're there.
We're in a work session anyway, so we can't.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
I think probably, we should probably discuss this some more. I don't know that we want to do it yet tonight, but we do have some time allotted in the work set, or in the retreat this weekend. And maybe do some brainstorming. We've got some good information here. Sounds like Pete may have some other ideas as well. So I think maybe I think you're right on the consensus is that more proactive code enforcement. And I think maybe we look at that direction of what the best way to get that would be, and I think that could be our discussion.
And I've had other discussions. The mayor brought up a good point too. Are there certain code violations that we want to prioritize enforcement of, and that could be a way to get more bang for your buck also. So.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of options. I guess my point is that I don't think at least I haven't, and this is new, I haven't heard what we have explored and haven't explored. I mean, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, they're the police. He's in charge of code enforcement. They're maybe have some ideas that we need to look at without us saying, do it this way, or this way. I mean, that's...
I'd just like to jump in real quick. I want to comment on Neil's suggestion about, maybe commingling the records clerk and evidence function. It's kind of for us, kind of an open canvas. We'll consider anything. One of the challenges we would have with that to keep in mind is that our evidence operation is not on site. It's at a separate location. So that adjacency would create some challenges there. The other thing I wanted to mention, for what it's worth, and we talked about this in our meeting earlier today, that as you go to your retreat and you have further discussions on the code enforcement function for the city, I would encourage you to think in terms of a system and a process. The system of code enforcement that starts with the code enforcement function, philosophy, and style of enforcement that you really feel the community wants, and the planning zoning component of how that's going to play into that. So it's a very smooth and fluid system that then plays into the court system. So you're looking at it holistically. That's all I would encourage you to think about.
That's all I got.
We good? Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Okay, any business from the council? Len? Anything to add, subtract?
Nothing right now. I've got one thing. The fire department, next Saturday, at 6 o'clock, 6:30 at the senior center, they're going to have a graduation ceremony.
This Saturday, yes.
It's coming Saturday.
6
At 6
p.m.
o'clock at the senior center. There's 4 firemen, I believe. They're coming out of the academy, and they're going to be there with their families. And so if we could get a few minutes, stop by and congratulate them, it'd be greatly appreciated.
6 p.m. That'd be right after our retreat.
Yeah.
Tommy, go ahead.
I had a chance last night to be on the Coffee with the Counselors group, and we got changed in location, I believe, in rooms, and it was a little bit tight, but it was very informative. Lots of good comments, They seem to appreciate us being involved. Many topics come up, from planning commission issues regarding a cell phone tower to business licenses was a big subject. The rental licenses was a big subject. There was mentioned a concern. I started writing down some notes, and I'll put it into one phrase: lack of transparency. They were asking questions regarding things the city does, and some of their thoughts were that there was a lack of transparency. And it was just in issues like on code enforcement, got code enforcement on the brain, on the business licenses, that all of a sudden they raised up and they didn't understand why. And why was that? And so they were talking about those issues. They talked about the website. Our website was not as clear as some would like to see it. The Arlington speed, should have said this before the chief left, but speed in Arlington was a real issue to one person. The water pump station was another issue. Communication to the city seems to be an issue. However they're communicating, they were struggling with getting answers back or whatever. If they emailed the wrong person or whatever. Then there was evidently I heard that comment before about the school board. There was a fellow in there about the school board, and he was wishing the city could get more involved with the school board, but I thought it was a great conversation. People were really talking in a positive. They were glad we were listening. And
I got a question for you on that, because I handle a speed trailer. I put it in and out and set it. Where was the guy located, east or west on Arlington?
East Arlington.
East Arlington?
Yeah.
Okay. I can get it out there for him.
The speed's not high enough?
Yeah, they want it to be like 65.
Oh, excellent, good, 'cause that's what I normally do.
He's done the traffic safety before and complained about it.
Has he?
Stevie, what you got? So Tom and Kim and I today had the opportunity to tour our water intake, Clackamas River Water Providers. I was not aware that we are a 10% owner in that. There's more there than just sucking water in and filtering it. It's an interesting facility. And one of the things that they need from us is they need somebody to sit in on the meetings. The other districts are there. We are not represented, and we need to have a representative. Maybe we could add that to a future agenda so that we can get that taken care of.
In the past, when designated liaisons, we had one designated to regional public works type activities. That was Ray Jaron in the past. So, yeah, we'll be needing to do that soon.
Is that on our list?
Yes, I've discussed the liaison process with the mayor, and there are some logistics that have to take place but yes, it's on the list.
Kim, let's go down your end.
You guys are going to be real glad to hear this. These guys stole all my thunder, our water intake system, and coffee with the counselor.
Kim.
They were good. That's all I got.
Nothing? Neil?
No. Unfortunately, mentioned that a longtime member of our community passed away about a week and a half ago, Rich Holloman, also known as Beef. had worked at the high school for about 20 years, coached many youth and high school teams, and had a real good celebration Saturday. Pretty much filled the gym, and he'll be missed. And so, other than that, I was going to ask if we had any planned meetings coming up for Parks Rec and
I'm looking at scheduling those now. I believe we're going to have the traffic safety on the 4th Monday of February. I'm looking for a date for Park and Rec, and I would like to do it in February, but both committees are designated for that 4th Monday, but I may try to pick because I want them to have some input on the budget process.
And speaking of that, the elusive mid-year budget committee meeting.
Yes. I've asked Tammy Bannock to send out an email to the budget committee to see if next Thursday would work for folks.
That would be the 5th?
I believe
Do we have a
so.
new calendar up?
Yeah.
We do.
It would be
the 5th. The 5th. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Just to follow up on the liaison positions, there's some vacant, there's some that, I don't know if we ever belong, but they're asking for us to belong. So just start considering where you might want to wind up, so we could have that discussion and make those appointments. Some of them are time sensitive. C4 is it asked us a week ago to appoint someone there, Housing Authority. So we got to get on that and start picking liaisons, and everybody's got to start bringing that info to us or out there.
I will email out a list of the liaison positions and who previously held them. So I'll send that out tomorrow, so all city councilors can see that.
So, I mean, but like I said, C4 and housing specifically, so we need to make that sooner
and that
than
wasn't
later.
a designated liaison position. I guess we could call it that. City council had done that separately, but I'll include that on the list.
That housing, is that Clackamas County?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I worked on that committee for a while, so might be interesting.
Pete, when can we, I mean, when do we need to make those? Can we do that next?
We could do it at the next regular meeting.
Well, I think we ought to just get that done.
Okay.
So, I guess we'll just kind of talk in between and
Can we
figure
do that? Well, we can talk about it at the retreat.
All right, talk about it at the retreat. That's it. That's it.
I know.
Anything else? Everybody
No,
good? All right, this meeting's adjourned. Good night.